Hi everyone, sorry there was some technical difficulty over here. We found something else, but it looks like we're live now. Welcome everyone to our Torah Studies class. We practiced to you exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And this class actually is going to be broadcasted on YouTube. So it's our pleasure to stream to Torah, and this is something that has been very important in Chabad. Make sure we get to people after. We've got something very important here. Now I think you will hear me a lot better now, if you have not yet heard me. So we want to welcome you again, everyone, to our Torah class. This week's portion is Parshat Vayechi, and it's Parshat Chazak. It's our JLI Torah studies, which we haven't had, unfortunately, for a while. We've been learning many other different things, but this has not been something that was possible exactly through the JLI Torah studies lately because of Hanukkah and different other things that came up in between. We're happy to say that we're back, and Bezrat Hashem will be having more weekly Torah studies classes besides our halacha classes. I also want to announce that Bezrat Hashem, we're going to have a lot more educational classes here at Chabad, whether they're live or in person. So stay tuned, and we are going to make it really nice and in a way that everyone should really connect to it. Something that's a takeaway, a Shabbat, like we say, a Shabbat takeaway. That's really the point of this class, even though it's class could go for up to an hour. At least 50 minutes, but nevertheless, it has the punchline of the class, which is the last part of the class, is really what you could go home with and bring to your families. So welcome everyone. This is Rabbi Mandy of Chabad Parcels North. Please share, like, comment. We have a commenting box on YouTube, and you can comment live. And if we are able to answer you right away, we will do that as well. Otherwise, you're welcome to reach out in other forms for questions. Okay, so this class is actually going to be titled Earth It or Win It. When to throw your hat in the ring and when not to. And again, it's on the portion of Vayechi. And it's really pertaining to Yaakov Avinu coming to Eretz Mitzrayim. And we're going to jump straight into it regarding the fact that he ended up in Mitzrayim. And it says in the portion, Vayechi Yaakov be'Eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Mitzrayim Shva Esri Shana, 17 years. Vayehi Yimei Yaakov, and it was the days of Jacob. Shnei Chai, of the years of his life, Sheva Shonim, 7 years. V'Arbaim Mas Shana, and 140. In other words, 147 years in total. So there's a first, I should say, a number one question: why is it that the portion starts this way? We call it Vayechi, the life. Why does the person consider this or talk about this as his life? He had a whole life besides these 17 years. And why does the portion speak about first, specifically, the 17 years of Jacob in Egypt? And and then it talks about everything else about his life. Why doesn't the Torah just tell us in general his life? What happened about these 17 years? And because he talks about specifically these 17 years, it comes to teach us that these were specific years that he lived. These were very fundamental years of his life. These were years that he lived best. Whereas the other years, not necessarily. The Baal HaTurim, which is a commentary on Bereshit, Rabbi Yaakov, the Baal HaTurim, he also, and just in case you want to know who the Baal HaTurim was, the Baal HaTurim actually lived from 1269 to 1343. He was an halachic authority and a codifier, and he was born in actually Germany, but then he moved to Toledo, Spain, where where his father, the noted halachist Rabbeinu Asher, was also with him, and they to escape basically the persecution in those years. The Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, which was his name, Yaakov, the son of Asher, he wrote the Arba Turim, which they called it the four Turim. It's a very, very, very beautiful compilation of Code of Jewish Law, and he's one of the greatest authorities that we know of today. So he writes, what does he write? He writes that Jacob lived 17 years in the land of Egypt, since his earlier years were not truly alive, due to his mourning for Joseph. And this is, we're quoting, exact quote from him. Due to his mourning for Joseph, about which he said, I will go down mourning my son in the afterlife. And therefore, that wasn't really life. And that's why his real better life, his life that was considered life, was specifically there. So that's what he explained as to why specifically we consider these years important years of considered more lived than the other years, and why the Torah therefore specifically noted that. The Alshich, the Reb Moshe Alshich, just in case you weren't sure who the Alshich was. So what's beautiful about learning with JLI Torah studies is we will give you also insight of all the halachic codifiers, all their names and who they were. Reb Alshich, he was born in Turkey. His name was Moshe. From 1508 to 1593, he moved to Israel, to the holy city of Tzvat, where he became a student of Rabbi Joseph Cairo, the preeminent codifier of the Jewish law. And Alshich's teachings remain very popular till this very day. And what he's famous for as well is the Torah Moshe, a commentary on the Torah. His students included Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital is a very famous disciple of his, and Rabbi Yom Tov Zahalon. And he was buried in Tzafat, actually. So if you want to go to visit the Alshich in Tzafat, he is there. So what does the Alshich elaborate? What does the Alshich continue and say? The Alshich says like this. I'm going to read it in the English. Jacob lived, and this is again to I guess, give us more explanation on this aspect, the fact that it was the best years of his life because of the fact that he had because of the fact that he had that he the other years were years of mourning. Um, so he's going to expound a little more on that. Second. So what does he say? He says Jacob lived. The only years that you consider life were the 70 years he spent in Egypt, because the first half of the verse, that Jacob lived in Egypt, Jacob lived in Egypt, and then the second half of the verse, Jacob's life came to 147 years, is true. And he explains like this: this is human nature. One may live for 1,000 years in peace, repose followed by a few bitter and agonizing years, leading to death, and it will seem as if all one's life was filled with days of pain and darkness. The reverse is also true. Most of one's days were lived in pain, and they improved only near the end. One died in satisfaction. Good days will seem to have paid, and one died in satisfaction. The good days will seem to have paid for all one's toil, as if all one's life was equally good. This is what the verse comes to tell us. That if not for the 17 years in Egypt, all of Jacob's days would have been called sojourning in the world, but not living. And whatever good he had would have been lost among the variety of sorrow. But because his years in Egypt were alive, they transferred all his days so that he lived for actually 147 years as well. This is why the days of his life are referred to in singular, because they were in his life all equally good, redeemed by the last 17. Meaning to say that the 17 years made the rest of his whole life so worthwhile. This is the simple meaning of the verse of the first verse in our Parshat, that Yaakov's years in Egypt, and he's again elaborating of what the Balaturim, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher said. And he's saying this is a simple meaning of the first verse in our Parsha, that Yaakov's years in Egypt were the best years of his life, so good that relative to the rest of his days, they were the only time he had a true life. And that is what he's trying to say. Well, I'll tell you a little bit of a story to explain to you what's going on over there. And this is the question. The one who became the Tzemach Tzedek, third Chabad Rebbe of Lubavitch, once went to his grandfather and asked him a question on this verse. He was obviously a child, and he wasn't a Rebbe yet. His grandfather was the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, Rishon Zalman of Liadi, who wrote the Tanya. And this is what happened, and it's actually recorded in the Yom Yom from day to day, which is a compilation from the Rebbe based on the works of the previous Rebbe. And this is how it's written in the Hayom Yom. When the Tzemach Tzedek was a boy, and he learned the passage, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. His teacher translated according to the Baal HaTurim, what we just finished saying, the commentary, our father Jacob lived his 17 best years in Egypt. Otherwise, why was he mentioning it? When he returned home from school, he asked his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, what did he ask him? He said, how can it be that our father Jacob, the elect of the patriarchs, Bechir Shabbat, what we call it, should have as the best of years of his life, biggest tzaddik on earth, the best years of his life are what? The 17 that he lived in Egypt, the land of corruption? And that is an answer to why the pasuk individualizes this 17 years and makes it a big deal and mentions it specifically, is to tell us that they were better years, like Baturim explains in the Alshich that it was because that it was better than having the years of mourning, and it made all the rest of his years better. That's why it was the best years of his life. How can we say about Yaakov Avinu that these should be the best years if it's such a terrible place? And he's asking, the Alter Rebbe is asking the first Rebbe of Chabad to answer his question, his grandfather. The Alter Rebbe answered him and said like this. It says in the portion, and Yehuda he sent before him to Joseph. He sent before Yaakov to Joseph to give instructions for Goshen. The Midrash states that, and Rashi also quotes, that Rabbi Nehemiah said to establish a house of study so that Torah would be there and the tribes would study the Torah. To give instructions for Goshen means, in a deeper sense, that when one learns the Torah, he comes closer to Almighty, may be blessed. Even in Egypt, it was true to say, Vayechi, he lived. And basically, this is what the first Rabbi of Chabad is answering, the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, that Yaakov had set up for him Torah learning. And therefore, when you say corruption, when the Tzemach Tzedek, when his grandson was concerned, how could this be the best years of his life because it was such a corrupt place? Don't forget, Yaakov had something set up for him, and it could have been the closest to God because of the Torah learning that was set up for him. And for the Tzemach Tzedek, for his grandson, the third Rebbe of Chabad, at the time when he asked, for him it was hard for him to, how could it be that Yaakov, such a great tzaddik, in the lowest of low in Egypt, would be the greatest place for him? In the Holy Land, it was considered suffering for Yaakov. And specifically in the lowest of low, that was where he thrived. And that's why he asked his grandfather, and this was his grandfather's answer, that really there was Torah learning set up for him. And he had the closest things to God also in the most lowest of places. But you know what? We have to ask a question over here. Why did the Tzemach Tzedek, why did this grandson, great tzaddik for himself, have to ask the question altogether? The young boy, and he was a righteous young boy, should have realized. Or at least, the Alter Rebbe should have answered him simply. Like this. And we're going to quote, again, a pasuk, which Rashi explains on it. And with that, it should have been simple. It says, what does it say? It says, V'yalum Mitzrayim, they went up from Egypt. They went up from Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan, to their father Jacob. This is the brothers of Yosef. And what did they tell him? They told him like this: Joseph is still alive. And they told him that he ruled over the entire land of Egypt. And his heart changed, for he did not. And then it says about Yaakov, it says his heart changed and he didn't believe them. And they told him all of Joseph's words that he had said to them, and he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him. And then the spirit of their father Jacob was revived. What does Rashi say? Rashi says on these words, it says, all of Joseph's words, Joseph gave them a sign. In what topic he was engaged when he separated from Jacob. That was the section dealing with the red heifer. Sorry, with the Egla Rufa, with the laws about the heifer that's beheaded, and what does it say? It says, and he saw the wagons that Joseph sent, and it doesn't say that Paro sent. Meaning to say like this. That when he's saying that he saw the wagons that Joseph sent, so if he wanted to take it face value, he could have said, these are the wagons that Paro sent. Why was Yaakov revived when he heard from Yosef? Because not only did he realize that his son was still living physically, but he also realized that Joseph kept the family traditions. And he even was remembering what he learned with his father at the time that they departed from each other. Even after being in Egypt for so many years. And if you want, I could explain it to you even better. We're holding the last portion of Parshat Vayechi, and this was actually noted in Parshas Vayigash, and it says there. It says in pasuk, in that pasuk of Vayigash 45, 28, 27. Sorry, Davrei Love, and they spoke to him. It's called Davrei Yosef. All the words of Yosef, the Yaris Agoles, and it says, and Yaakov saw the wagons of Shalach Yosef, the Yosef sent. Agalot Egla Milashon Egla Rufa. Then it reminds us of the discussion they had in learning about the heifer that had to be beheaded. And that's why Yaakov wasn't only excited because he saw that he was alive physically, but also because he saw that he was still remembering that the way he sent him these wagons was a way to sort of hint to Yaakov that he remembered what they learned before they departed from each other, by sending him agalot egla milashon egla rufa. And that's why he was even more alive. He became more awakened, not only from the physical aspect of it, but also the spiritual that he saw. Yosef was involved. So that's that. I'm gonna go straight to the next aspect. So what do we see over there? We see the Alshich also elaborates. What does he say? The Alshich also elaborates, and what does he say? He says like this: the brother simply told Jacob that Joseph was righteous. Jacob would have not believed them. Therefore, they told their father at length what they saw and recognized the brother's righteousness. Well, then he could say about Joseph still lives, that he's still a tzaddik, still righteous. For only tzaddik is called alive. We say tzaddik when we saw some yikru chaim. Meaning a tzaddik is called alive, period, and especially also after his death. So it was really not about the physical aspect, it was the spirituality. Therefore, the brothers first said, Joseph is alive. And only afterwards added almost as an afterthought. And he's a ruler, because that wasn't over the land of Egypt, because that wasn't the real thing that they were trying to bring out to Yaakov. They were trying to bring out to Yaakov the righteousness of Yosef, and that's what really gave him life. So we see from this that really the greatest nachas, the greatest life for Yaakov is how Yosef was living in Egypt. He was living as a yid, and that's what gave him a lot of nachas. And that should have been obvious for the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, when he came to his grandfather. He didn't have to ask him. He shouldn't have asked to ask him. Why was it in a place of corruption? Why was he having the best years? He was seeing nachas of his child. He was seeing Yosef, his son, keeping up traditions, keeping up, remembering even what they learned before they left each other, and still connected to godliness, to Torah, to mitzvahs. And he was still tzaddik. And that's what we're trying to bring out over here. That's what all these interpretations and commentaries explain. So shouldn't that have been something that the Tzemach Tzedek should have known? Based on all this, the Tzemach Tzedek should have realized that's why he was living the best years of his life, even in a place of corruption. But that's only if we look at the question that the Tzemach Tzedek asked in this way. But perhaps the Tzemach Tzedek was asking a different type of question. And for that, we have to go to the next verse. If anyone has any questions, we welcome all our viewers. Hope everyone hears me clearly here. Seems like there's a little bit of friction. Hopefully you do. Okay. So if everyone's good till now, that's a good sign. And we're going to go further. So, let's look at a little bit about more what Egypt was at that time. It was probably the worst spiritually in the whole world at that point. Egypt means Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means boundaries. And to explain how the Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, was really asking a different question, let's understand what Egypt was. And let's talk about, like, from the Alter Rebbe's perspective, how the Alter Rebbe was referring to this concept of Egypt. And he says like this in Torah Or, Mitzrayim is Lashon Meitzar B'chinas Halam V'Hester. The Mitzrayim, Egypt, stems from the word Meitzar, constraint, connoting concealment of God. And the whole purpose that the world was created was in order to reveal God rather than conceal him. The very purpose of a human being in this world is to express God within the world of darkness. Whereas Egypt was doing the total opposite. In contrast, it was the whole concept of it was divine concealment. It was called the nakedness of the land, meaning it was naked from godliness. So that's the understanding of Mitzrayim from the Alter Rebbe's perspective, from a more spiritual way. Let's look how the Kohelet Rabbah. The Kohelet Rabbah is a midrashic text, and he says like this: Rabbi Berechia b'shem Rabbi Shimon Lakish said like this: for everything that God created in man, he created a parallel on earth. For example, man has a head and the earth has a head. As it is written, the head of dust of the earth. Man has eyes and the earth has eyes. As it is written, and he covered the eye of the earth. Man has ears and the earth has ears. As it is written, give ear, O earth. Man has stomach and the earth has stomach. As the verse says, living at the stomach of the earth. Man has a place of nakedness, the earth has nakedness. As Joseph said about Egypt, you have come to scout out the nakedness of the earth. Man has legs and the earth has legs. As the verse says, and the earth stands forever. When you say whatever God created in man, he created in the earth. Medrash is making clear that Egypt, the nakedness of the earth, is this lowly. That's what we see in this verse, this Medrash. That man has a place of nakedness on the earth, and man has a place of nakedness, and the earth has nakedness. And how do we know that? We see by Joseph about Egypt, that it speaks about the nakedness of the earth, that you have come to scout the nakedness of the earth. And therefore, what the Medrash is coming to tell us here is that there is this lowly place of concealment of God, and that is Egypt. And to understand what really the Tzemach Tzedek was asking, true, the Tzemach Tzedek didn't have to ask any question. It was obvious that if he was seeing the nachas of his son, that his son was connected with God, then why shouldn't it be the best place? And why did he have to ask that? In a place of corruption, how could it be the best place? How was the best of his life? He didn't have to ask that, but the truth is because he knew the lowest levels of the earth is Egypt. Because the Tzemach Tzedek knew that. This is what bothered this young Rebbe, obviously, before he was Rebbe. How could such a horrible spiritually devoid place where Yaakov was meant to have spent the best years of his life? That is the place where he had the best years of his life. It's such a devoid, low place. How could that be? Based on what we understand, this is the lowest place of the whole world. Whether you're having nachas from your son, whether you're seeing that he's a tzaddik, but it's the lowest place of the earth. Is that considered the best years of your life? So, to go further, the matter is even more puzzling when we consider exactly who our forefather Yaakov was. Who was Yaakov? Take a look at the Medrash, which speaks about his elite status, how great he was among all the forefathers. And what does it say about him? It says, choicest of the forefathers is Jacob, as it is written, for Jacob was the chosen by God. God Avram, the verse states that you chose Abraham. Now Avram was chosen. That you chose Abram. Now Avram was chosen from among the idol worshippers. Therefore, when the verse states regarding Jacob that God chose him, pool of which he was chosen was his own family and forefathers. Meaning, what are we saying? We're saying that we see that specifically by Yaakov, he was chosen amongst all his forefathers as the greatest amongst them. Avram, it talks about him amongst the idol worshippers. It's different. But here, we're talking about him amongst his own family. Amongst his own family, he was the greatest. Even amongst the spiritual great people like his father Yitzchak and his grandfather Avraham, Yaakov was the most special, the choicest of all the forefathers. Egypt was the lowest and most spiritually devoid of all lands. And that is what we're trying to see, the contrast. Yaakov was so holy, so high, the highest of all of them. While the land was the most devoid, how could it be considered the best years of his life? And that's what someone is asking. Ran the Yaakov would survive as a tzaddik in Egypt. But why would the choices of our holy fathers have to be to spend the years of his life in Egypt? Why the most greatest tzaddik? Why would the most devoid, low place be the choicest? Be the best place for Yaakov Avinu? Be the best years of his life? Why did that have to be the case? True, fine. He was able to survive as a tzaddik. He saw his Yosef, how great he was. He had the place of learning, etc., set up. But why would that be the place where he should be the greatest guy on earth? And that is what the Tzemach Tzedek was asked. And for that, we need answers. And with this, we are getting to the punchline over here and the takeaway, like we call the Shabbos table takeaway. God's help, we'll have many more Shabbos table takeaways. Possible solution is like this. If you were asked the Tzemach Tzedek's question, what would you answer? Why would a pious man such as Yaakov Avinu have to spend the best years of his life in such a vile place, and that be considered the best place for him? So the first thing that you might think of is you could say, fine, you know why this was the best? Because this was a challenge for me. This is where I had to take that test and see if I'll be able to overcome it. Maybe that's why it's the choicest. Maybe that's why it's the greatest. Because where you have the challenge and you're able to overcome it, that's the greatest. And really, the Alter Rebbe could have answered him that way. And he could have said, could have told his grandson that you could bring out the greatest things. When you come through challenges, you could come to the greatest heights. The challenges bring out the best in you. When you're just sitting and enjoying God's rays, it's easy. When you have to work for it, we say Yitron ha'or mitoch ha'choshech. In fact, the greatest things come from the darkest places. That could have been Yaakov's. That could have been the Alter Rebbe's answer, but he didn't answer him that. What did he answer him? What did we say he answered him? He answered him like this. That he sent Yehuda to open up a place of learning. So there was the Torah, etc. That's not this answer. That should have been the answer. This could have been the answer. What we just finished saying. But he chose to say about Yehuda, that he sent him for a place of learning. Why? And that is really, in this lies something very important. The Alter Rebbe was trying to tell the Tzemach Tzedek, tell the third Rebbe of Chabad, something that we learned already in last week's Parshat. That says over there, this concept that he sent Yehuda ahead of him to establish a yeshiva of Torah study. It was through establishing the Torah study in the land of Egypt that Yaakov was able to thrive in the land of darkness. That's what he's trying to say. In fact, it was the context of Egypt that brought out the importance of a Jew at teaching and connecting themselves to Torah. And we see this also, the Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya as well. Meaning to say that when the Alter Rebbe is telling us, Alter Rebbe is telling his grandson that this is the answer to that strong question. How could the lowest places for the greatest tzaddik be the best for his life? He could have answered him that it was through the struggle, that's where you get the greatest heights. But instead, he told him this concept of the fact that he sent Yehuda. Yaakov Avinu sent Yehuda to establish a yeshiva. That through establishing the yeshiva of Torah study, that's what connected them and gave them the strength in the land of darkness. And it wasn't just through the Torah study, it was through the Torah study in such a place that in a place like that, it made you connect and be so much stronger in your Torah study. Torah for itself is one with God. God put himself in the Torah. By throwing ourselves into the Torah and making it part of our lives, we gain the power to succeed over any environment. And the Alter Rebbe explains what gives the Torah this power. He says like this: the Torah is compared to water. Just as water descends from a higher to a lower level, so as the Torah descended from a place of glory, which is his blessed will and wisdom, for the Torah of his Holy One, blessed be he, are one and the same. No thought can apprehend him at all. The Torah has progressively descended through hidden stages, stage after stage, with the descent of the worlds until it is integrated into the corporal substance and the things of this world. Comprising almost of all commandments of the Torah, their laws and the combinations of material letters, written with ink in a book, namely the 24 volumes of the Torah, prophets, and writings, Tanakh. So God did this so that every thought should be able to apprehend the Torah. Every thought should be able to apprehend the Torah, thus inasmuch as the Torah and its commandments clothe all 10 faculties of the soul, all its 613 organs, from head to foot. The soul is altogether truly bound with the bundle of life of God. The very light of God melts and integrates within. It's from the head to the foot. So the Alter Rebbe is explaining that what gives Torah the power? Torah gives power to the person because of what the Torah has in it, because of what the Torah is doing. It's connecting the person, his mind, his heart, and everything within him to comprehend it. It's bringing a person to that level that when he's in such terrible places, he could tackle it. And meaning to say, the Torah is not a simple book, rather an expression of God's will and wisdom within the world. Whereas the world, as we learned in the previous section in the creation, it's considered something that conceals godliness. And the Torah is the exact opposite, a creation that in fact expresses him. And being so, that's what can connect us and keep us connected within that terrible, terrible space of Egypt. And he's really trying to explain over here that it's not that the greatest heights are coming from the darkest places. That is a nice thought and a thought that we learn in Chassidus. That's a beautiful thought. But why was it specifically for Yaakov, the greatest tzaddik, this low place, such a special and important, the best of his life? And that is specifically because of the Torah, that the Torah connected him with God and therefore gave him the greatest strength to overcome the darkness of the world. And like the Rebbe Rashab also, Shalom Dov, Rav Lubavitch also explains. He says like this: by illumination of your face, you give us the Torah of life. Even as the Torah is given to us in its worldly form, it's still the illumination of your face, and it reaches up to the depths of the infinite Creator Himself. The worldly Torah in the same. The worldly Torah is the same Torah as the one above, meaning it's connected with God and gives you that that strength that you could connect with it while being in such a terrible low place of the world. And it's like he says that because we're connected with God, we could overcome any type of environment. Meaning to say like this, that for a Jew to be in Israel, it's easy. We take it for granted. We sometimes will say, fine, I'll learn later. For us to say that in the darkest places you could come to the greatest heights, that's a great lesson. But that wasn't the point that Yaakov wanted to say. Yaakov wanted to say a different point. He wanted to say that you could be in the greatest lands, in the highest places, but you take it for granted. By being in Egypt, it taught Yaakov, and told Yaakov, I have to bring the Torah there to keep me connected. And because of that, that's why the Torah connected him so much more. He was so much more connected in that place, even though it was the lowest place. And that's really what he's trying to say over here with this lesson. And like the Rebbe Rashab explains, that the Torah really connects you with God and lets you overcome these terrible things. But if you don't see that, if you don't see the importance of the connection of Torah, if you don't see the importance of, because it's like the Jew that lives in Israel and he feels Jewish and he doesn't feel like he has to learn and takes it for granted. A person who grew up always this way, and sometimes he loses his faith because he just takes it for granted. What was beautiful and why it was the best years of Yaakov's life is because in Eretz Yisrael it's great. But for Yaakov, even the biggest tzaddik, to be in a crazy low place, it brings you to a feeling of a must and an urgency to connect to Torah, that the Torah should protect you and keep you close to Hashem, because that's what, like we explained with all these interpretations, that's what Torah is. It's a enclothing of God. God is in it. And by you connecting with the Torah, it's going to keep you connected with the right things and overcome terrible things. Egypt was able to bring out that aspect. It was telling the Jew, like the Jew sometimes in diaspora, like the Jew in USA, all of a sudden becomes religious. It's like telling him, I'm in a crazy place, I feel alone, and therefore I need Torah to protect me. And that's why it was the best years of his life, because he had that Torah, and it was not taken for granted. And that's how special. This is really what this is really what the Alter Rebbe is trying to answer the Tzemach Tzedek. That as high as Yaakov was, as low as the place was, how could it be the best years? He could have enjoyed himself as a tzaddik in some other place, and that could have been the best years. Why are we saying this is the best years of his life? That was really his true question. Even if his son is a big tzaddik and he's seeing that, but there's so many other great times. But the point is what we're trying to say is that that's what Alter Rebbe is answering him. That's why his question was such a good question, because it was a low place, and why was that the best? But that's what the Alter Rebbe is answering, because that the Torah was there. Torah was pertinent there. Torah was strong there. It was something that was necessary. It was something that you couldn't go without. And it connected him with Hashem. And that's why, and it connected everyone there with Hashem. Yaakov on his level, and everyone else, those that were less of a tzaddik, more of a tzaddik. It doesn't matter who it was, but it made a person feel the responsibility and the importance. That's Yehuda Shalach Lefanav Geshem. And Yehuda, he sent to Geshem, he sent him to connect with God. And that's why, because the Mitzrayim was so great and so low. For that itself, for the reason that it was low, that's what made it the great years of his life. Because it made you say to yourself, it made a Jew say to himself, I need to connect with the Torah, I need to connect with Hashem, so I should be protected. Whereas when he's living in the land of Israel, sometimes he says, I don't need it. I'm good. I feel the holiness from the people around me that are doing the rituals. When we are here in the United States of America, and we left sometimes Israel either to run away from holiness, Or we left Israel because it's sometimes we're feeling we're missing it. Unfortunately, sometimes because we live in it and we take it for granted. We need to assure so much more that connection that we have to have with Hashem. That is meant to bring us, because we are going to the diaspora, because the diaspora is so low, and we're going there. Why do we go there sometimes? We go there sometimes because we want to connect so much stronger. Because we feel we'll connect so much more, because the galus, the exile is so much stronger. Therefore, we'll feel like we have to connect so much more, and it will bring us to a higher level, and it will give us the best that we could possibly have. And that's why we're not allowed to let that go. And when the New York Board of Ed is saying that they want to impose new rules for private schools, Jewish schools, and tell us that we can't have the amount of hours that we wanted for holy Torah studies. This whole concept that we're trying to say over here, this whole thing that the Alter Rebbe answered, this whole concept that the Alter Rebbe answered to his son, to his grandson, to Tzemach Tzedek, to explain to him why that was the best years. Why is this world sometimes the greatest levels a person could reach in this world is because of how low it is. Therefore, it makes us and asks from us to be so much more connected. And that's why they could be the best years. Why would, God forbid, we let the New York Board of Ed be able to take that away from us? Then it's actually taking away the whole purpose of why Mitzrayim is the best years of Yaakov's life. We have this urge to connect to something more holy because we're in such a low place. And that is going to be taken away from us. Then where are we going to end up? God forbid. If we don't have that protection, where are we going to end up? And perhaps the fact that a Jew ends up here in this side of the world is for that reason. So then how did we gain? How did we connect him? How did we make him more connected? How are we going to make a dira b'tachteinu, a dwelling place for God in this world? How is it going to be the best years of our life? And that is really also something that we're talking about right now in the world. This whole terrible thing is here in New York. The whole fight that we're trying to make sure that the Jewish traditions and continuity and Torah and mitzvahs continue in the yeshiva system in our lives. So that's that. And he says like this. This is then the unique advantage of the mitzvah of Torah study all over over all the other commandments involving action, and even those relating to speech. For through all the commandments, this is from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. For all the other commandments involving speech and action, or action, the Holy One, blessed be He, is integrated within the soul and envelops it from the head to toe with divine light. However, with regard to Torah study, in addition to the fact that the student's intellect is enveloped with divine wisdom, this divine wisdom is also contained in the student's mind, to the extent that his intellect comprehends, grasps, and encompasses as much as is able to. Because the Torah is contained within the soul and the intellect of a person who studies it, it's called bread and food of the soul. Physical bread nourishes the body, absorbed internally in the very inner self, where it's transformed into blood and flesh of his flesh, whereby he lives and exists. In the same fashion, the Torah study and its comprehension by the soul of the person who studies it well with concentration until the Torah is absorbed by his intellect and is united with it, and they become one. It's because this is like of the bread. This becomes nourishment for the soul and its inner life from the giver of life, the Ein Sof, who is contained within the wisdom of the Torah. So he's elaborating, explaining how amazing the Torah is, what the Torah is doing to the person and connecting him so much to the spirituality, so much more by having it. And he could connect with God in such a crazy, amazing way. And through the Torah study, that's what really, in essence, in this exile, illuminates the world. It's the Torah study. That we connect with it and we become one with God, and that is what's illuminating the whole world around us. And then, when we have that, we don't have an Egypt in our lives. And that is what the Alter Rebbe is trying to say. And like we see, it says in every generation, in every day, a person is ought to regard himself as if he is on that day going out of Egypt. This refers to the release of the divine soul from the confinement of the body, the serpent's skin, to be absorbed in the unity of light of blessing soul. This is achieved through the occupation of Torah and mitzvahs in general, that he actually has to feel like he's going out of Mitzrayim because he's connecting with God. Now we can understand why Yaakov sent Yehuda to Egypt to open up yeshiva. The Torah was the key to remaining above the evil land of impurity that was Egypt. For armed with the light of Torah, Egypt cannot conceal God. And like the Rebbe explains it also, as a result of Jacob sending Yehuda before him to establish a house of learning where would be Torah in Egypt, thus the arrival of Egypt would not weaken their worship of God whatsoever. The Jews were effectively never truly under the domination of Egypt and defined by the borders of Egypt because they were so connected with God. It's possible to have the best years of Jacob's life to be spent in Egypt. That life will surely lead us to the places that are not ideal for our spiritual lives. That's what life is. How do we deal with that? So that's what the Alter Rebbe explains to the Tzemach Tzedek. Yaakov spent the best 17 years of his life in Egypt because the Torah study. Egypt was really not Egypt at all. And therefore, specifically because of the Torah that was there, it didn't affect him at all. You may ask, why didn't Alter Rebbe tell him about the greatness of light over darkness? Because we're not looking to teach us this lesson of tests, that we should have tests, and therefore the greatness of a test. No. When you're educating a child, it's not important to teach us that we should fall into tests and try to overcome them. No, we should never come to tests at all. It says, it's asking us, God is asking from us not to have tests. So why would the Alter Rebbe sort of engage in that and try to answer such an answer like that? No, that's not the lesson. The Alter Rebbe wanted to teach his grandson a lesson forever. It wasn't just an answer to that question on that history that happened in Egypt. And that's why when you're educating a child, we have to bring out the greatness of Torah and how Torah connects us. And Torah is so great. And that's why we didn't need to talk about the advantages of overcoming tests, because we don't want to get tests altogether. But to bring out the greatness of Torah, that was something Alter Rebbe wanted to teach his grandson as a young child for educational purposes and to teach us a lesson in life. So we have nearly finished our live broadcast. To summarize, like this. So for a child, we say don't get involved with tests. It's not the moral of the story. That's when you're in a test, because we shouldn't come to tests altogether. We're not asking you to come to tests. We don't want to be in a negative place in our life and try to overcome it. That's not the purpose. Like we said, the whole purpose is to bring out the greatness of Torah. That was what he wanted to say to a child. A child, especially, especially when speaking to young children. But how about an adult? So at the end of the day, you have to speak to a child with positivity. You don't want to tell a child, because we have to learn that when we're in negative places, you have to bring out the greatness. We don't want to teach a child that. But for an adult, he could comprehend the concept that if you are in a terrible place, you have to bring out the greatness in it. So for the adult, perhaps the Alter Rebbe could have brought this example. So we say for the adult, he still did bring out this concept. The fact that Yaakov sent Yehuda to establish a yeshiva in Egypt, it says, what does it say? when he brought out this concept, the Alter Rebbe quoted it in his response. He said, the medrash the Alter Rebbe quoted, but he didn't bring the full expression of the medrash, which was, what does it say? Here's the original. It says, "L'saken lebeis Talmud shemisham tetzehira," established for Jacob a house of learning, for which Torah instruction would emerge from there. He didn't say that. Version the Alter Rebbe quotes adds the following words: "Banav hegim b'Torah," his children toiling in Torah. That's what he says. And the original is L'saken lebeis Talmud shemisham tetzehira. Why did the Alter Rebbe change the wording? That there it says to establish, in the original it says to establish for Jacob a house of learning from which Torah instruction would emerge. That's why he sent Yehuda there. And in the original Medrash it says Banam Hegem Atera. It says that his children are toiling in Torah. Sorry, the Alter Rebbe says Banam Hegem Atera, his children are toiling in Torah. He adds that. And the original doesn't say that. It says a place that there was going to be learning. So why did the Alter Rebbe say Banam Hegem Atera? So the explanation is like this: that Chassidus teaches us that Yaakov is one of the forefathers, was a perfect representative of God in this world. True tzaddik. His children, however, were slightly lower levels of holiness, a level which had to contend with the world of its concealment of God. Had to deal with the world where Yaakov. So relative to Yaakov, the children were like Bali Tshuva. They weren't like tzaddik. And in the version of the Medrash the Alter Rebbe quotes, part of what makes Yaakov's years in Egypt so great is specifically that his children would be toiling in Torah. In other words, through Yaakov would remain. Meaning his children would be toiling in Torah, that Yaakov would remain above the darkness of Egypt. His sons of that lower level would be within the darkness and still become great in Torah. That was what he was trying to say. By bringing out the Torah study of Yaakov's children, you see there that they would be learning, they would be within the darkness of the world and learn Torah. The bana of Hegem Atera, that they would be within the darkness learning Torah. And that is the concept of greatness of light that comes from the darkness. And that's why he mentioned that. Meaning for Yaakov himself, he would be higher than them. Bana of Hegem Atera. And they would become great Torah scholars within the world. That was the point. I'm going to end here. There is more to this, but it's time to end. And really the lesson is, like we mentioned, that a Jew has to remember that no matter what, being here is meant to strengthen us, not, God forbid, take us the other way. Like we see beautiful examples of people, because they live here in this exile, in this world, this mundane physical world, it brings them closer to Hashem. And that is the purpose of Torah. That's what makes us connect so much more with the Torah. And that is something that we have to fight for, especially in these types of places where Jews are here for that reason. They're waiting for and yearning for it. And it makes them have an incentive and a want and an urge to connect with Torah because of these types of places we live in. And that's why we have to fight for Torah and fight for more education in the schooling system and in our own lives, in our families, especially whether it's through ritual, through action, through mitzvahs, maisias, through action, actual mitzvahs, and definitely Torah study that brings to doing mitzvahs. But that is especially why we learn from this, how it's important. And this week's portion is so pertinent to right now, the times we live in, that we're having to deal with these issues. Therefore, it's really a wake-up call for all of us that we should be more vigilant and be careful and see to it that we adhere to the important sacred things that God commanded us, and especially in these types of places where if you don't have it, it could be the worst thing for a Jew. Especially, and we know that Jews are here for that purpose, like we said, that they're here because they want to connect more. Because you're in such a place, you connect more, and that's what's so much more beautiful. That's why it's the best years, and therefore we have to make sure that they get that. And on the other note, we have to also remember that the greatest light could come from the darkest places. So even if the fact that you have to struggle with the darkness, but you come and do the best you can in this terrible world that we live in, that it could be the best years of your life because of that. It could be the best years of life because of the Torah that connects you with God, and you don't have to have anything to do with negativity. And it could be the best years of your life because of the greatness that comes out of it, because the great heights that you could accomplish through the test and the having to deal with the negativity and still overcoming it. That's the greatness. We say the greatest light comes from the darkest places, when you have to deal with that challenging, overcome it. That's the greatest thing, right, for a person, both physically and spiritually. And and that's why for both reasons it's important to take this lesson of 17 best years of Yaakov's life. Think about that concept. It's not a history concept. It's like the Rebbe teaches us. It's a concept we have to live throughout our life, especially when we get into these exiles, these spiritual exiles in our own lives, personal lives, that sometimes could be even this really real type of exile, not just a story that we read in a book. Sometimes that we're really feeling those aspects that sometimes we read about, and sometimes even worse. We have to remember that the Bas Yehuda Shalach Lefanav Geishna, that Yaakov sent to Goshen with the Torah learning, meaning to say that it was the best years of his life, even though it was the lowest places, because of the Torah that connects us with God and doesn't let us connect with those negativities. And that's what we have to remember. It's the Torah that's going to connect us. The Torah is going to keep us wholesome. The Torah is going to keep us sane. The Torah is going to keep us not in exile, keep us away from exile. And that could be the best. It could be the best of our life in this exile because of the Torah, and because of the fact that we overcome the exile with right. Why is these lowest places the best places? Sometimes because we get to the greatest heights because we don't give into it. And then that's a lesson for everyone here to think about in his own life when he has these situations, challenges, to remember that he doesn't have to have the challenge. And if he has the challenge, he could overcome it, and he doesn't even have to have the challenge altogether. Firstly, he doesn't have to have the challenge if he's connected to Torah. And if he ever does have the challenge, like the Rebbe is saying, he could overcome it, and that's the greatest thing. And therefore, it's the greatest life. It could be the greatest life for a Jew, like Yaakov did, just like Yaakov had in Mitzrayim. So, in honor of this week's Parsha, let's take this lesson. Let's talk to our families about it on Shabbos, especially that these are things that we're fighting for right now: education of our children, making sure we're connected to the Torah, that the Torah is gonna give us that good feeling, that blessing of geula, of redemption. That even while being in exile, we could be on a different pedestal. We could be on a different level. And we have to teach it to our children, and that's it. And that's the lesson. And may we all merit to connect with the Torah, connect with Hashem, continue doing good deeds. May we have all a great Shabbos, and Mashiach should come now, where we'll see the ultimate, where Hashem godliness is revealed within our hearts and souls, and where we won't see any more exile. And then it will really be the best years of our life with Mashiach Tzidkenu, from Hedu B'Yameinu Mamish. Just a reminder, the Shabbos, my parents-in-law, the rabbi and rabbis in residence, this Shabbos is going to be at Chabad, so Rabbi and Rabbis in Vogel, the big Kiddush kindly sponsored by the Latka, co-sponsored by the Latka family in honor of everyone, and by the Sherman family in honor of um, in honor of Herb's son's birthday, um, and we'll upload all the details for the honors so we could say L'chaim on Shabbos as well. And we thank them kindly for their, and we'll have a big Kiddush and we'll celebrate and we'll say L'chaim. Just a reminder for those that are listening now, and spread the word to your friends. We want to have a big minyan, so please let the rabbi know that you could come. And yeah, we hope to see you again live soon, in person, and on live broadcast. Hopefully next week with more classes. And also, it's the end of the year, so I remind again about our end of year campaign, and anyone who would like to contribute towards Chabad and all that we do here, to continue what we do, both for the classes that we're teaching, the services that the rabbi and rebbetzim do for the community, both on a personal level when people call them and ask them, seek advice and help, and Torah study and classes that we do free of charge on an individual basis, on a public basis, as well as all the other maintenance and that for the Chabad, gas, heat, water, and all the rent, etc., as well as all the amazing programs that we do throughout the months and year, both from educational perspective to just a family oriented kids to adults, you name it, and all the wonderful things we do for the community. Please show your support and give back, so we could continue to grow and do more for the community. And so whatever you're giving is is going back to the community. So we're asking to please give back, be thankful for whatever the kindness you've received. At the same time, whatever you're giving is going to go back to you. So it's a win-win, and we want to thank all our kind sponsors and donors throughout 2018, and all our future sponsors and donors. So if you'd like to be a matcher, a Chai Club, a monthly recurring multiples of Chai, of life, donor, or a matcher from your business, a matcher for the campaign, or just a kind contribution, or voluntarily, please let us know. You know our number, or you could reach the Rabbi Rebbetzin personally, or via text, or via email, you name it. So please let us know. Have a Shabbat Shalom. Again, thank you all for watching. This is Rabbi Mendy Hecht of Chabad of Harstills North. And have a great weekend and Shabbat Shalom. And Shabbat Chazak, Chazak Venit Chazek. May this Shabbos really give strength. We should go from strength to strength, both physically, spiritually, and it should be the concept of Vayechi. It should be really the true life that a person has, like we mentioned before. We should have that really true life. We should come to that moment where we feel true life and peace and enjoyment of God in this world that we live in, with going from strength to strength, both physically and spiritually, in all ways. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much.